Auburn recruiting. I think one of the reasons why this has been or felt like a very short off season, because it's almost like the season is basically here if media days is here, right? I think one of the biggest reasons why this has felt like the shortest off season is because I think Auburn being very relevant in recruiting again with official visits, unofficial visits. Auburn is up to 16 commitments, even with two decommitments in recent weeks. There's been a lot of news surrounding Auburn recruiting, and that's due to the emphasis that this coaching staff has placed on recruiting, especially recruiting guys that they feel can help them compete with some of the best in college football. How are your thoughts just overall about how the recruiting has been going? We'll get into some questions about the QB position because that's the topic of the day. But what have been your thoughts about recruiting thus far, Dylan?
Yeah, I've really thought it's been an enjoyable offseason because now we're 48 days away from Auburn football officially being back. Kind of looking at just the class in general, I think Auburn has really touched on a lot of positions that need to be touched on. You're getting two tight ends, which one of them is going to be your receiving tight end, Hollis Davidson. You're getting a blocking tight end, Ryan Gee. The trenches have been absolutely been a focal point of this recruiting class, but there is a lack of skill offensive skill positions, as in wide receivers and quarterbacks, that we'll again talk about in a little bit. It has been a little slow over the past month or so. You haven't really gotten any big time Auburn commits in a while, and I think the fan base is eagerly waiting for Big Cat Weekend, which is I think what in 13 days, 2 weeks right now.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, it's been a very solid class so far. I think Auburn fans have a lot to be excited for with this class.
Yeah, and I think if you put it into perspective, Dylan, a couple of years ago, previous coaching staff, Auburn just seemed like they were just behind, right? Auburn had maybe what at this point, especially Harson's last year, first year of Harson, Auburn may have had at this point maybe what six commits, six people committed. And because it's a numbers game in terms of having guys committed to your class, Auburn's class was like ranked what 40th, 50th as a result of that
I
because
think the I think the highest Brian Harson ever got Auburn was 23, and that's because
yeah.
he had that recruiting the right guys, not the best guys mantra, which
Yeah. So again, coming from behind and playing catch up, like it just seemed just wasn't much to we were grasping for straws, looking for positives, right? And so for this coaching staff to be on top of recruiting, for Auburn to at one point been in the top five or have a top five class at one point, obviously we have a long way to early signing day. But for Auburn to be in the hunt for a lot of the big time recruits, and for Auburn to already have a top 15 class already, right outside the top 10, depending on what recruiting service that you're looking at, speaks to kind of how far we've come. And we are a week or two away from Big Cat Weekend. Personally, Dylan, I think there's I'm not worried about news being slow on the recruiting front because I remember what things was like a year ago, right? A year ago this time, Cam Coleman committed to Texas A&M and M, and people were panicking.
yep.
And Big Cat came and confidence was restored, hope was restored. And I think we're going to see a lot of that confidence being restored in terms of Auburn having a really good recruiting class. And I think the coaching staff is hanging on to that. We talked offline, and you made mention of some guys. Anquan Fegans, he's yet to commit. You mentioned Blake Woodby, who people feel good about Auburn in that regard, right? So there's a lot of positives remaining. There's a lot of guys who Auburn is in the hunt for still to come to Auburn. And again, Big Cat has just been again this coaching staff has made Big Cat, right? It kind of lost like its luster over the past few years, and it was a big deal last year, and I expect it to be a big deal this year. And I think it gives this coaching staff momentum going into the fall season. So,
Yep.
uh,
And it is worth mentioning as well. Big Cat was also when Perry Thompson announced that he was flipping from Alabama, and
absolutely,
if Auburn had I don't think it was Auburn's fault, but KJ Bolden has all said he was like just that
Almost
close
he almost
away,
yeah, yeah. But
almost
again,
committing.
the momentum had shifted in favor of Auburn, right? And
Oh,
I
for
think
sure.
even that week, Auburn had flipped some commitments, and I mean Auburn was beginning to pick up momentum that week going into that weekend. So I think a lot of the momentum will pick up around Big Cat. I think if you're a coaching staff, if you already know you got some kids in the fold, you may want them to hold some of that excitement for Big Cat. So yeah, that's I think let's just see how things play out at the end of July, and then we'll see whether or not maybe we should be concerned or we can exhale. I think we'll be just fine. I think Auburn will have a really good class when all is said and done. With that, let's turn our attention to the QB race, to the QB recruitment. Uh, it was all good just a week ago, it seemed, Dylan. Auburn was still in the hunt for JuJul Lewis, but last week they pivoted. It was announced that they began to pivot away from Juju. And I think this is another, from a recruiting standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, this is a coaching staff that has put us firmly in the hunt for some of the big time recruits. And I think that through no fault of them, because of NIL, Dylan, it's going to NIL is going to mean a lot in certain recruitments than others,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
If it's a big time recruit, NIL may play a huge factor, and if that kid knows he's a big time recruit, NIL plays a huge factor. And I think that was one of the factors that led to Auburn beginning to kind of pivot away, because Auburn needs a QB. They need to know going into fall camp, as they begin to turn their attention and focus on the season, they've got a QB in this class. We understand how important it is to have a QB already committed. We saw what it did for us last year when Walker White committed early in the year. They want to go ahead and get a QB on, and they just felt like they may need to turn their attention elsewhere, which leads us to two guys: Deuce Knight, who was mentioned earlier in the recruiting cycle as a possible target, and KJ Lacy, whose name has been mentioned early and often, the Texas commit, who has been listening to Auburn. Auburn's been in contact with him, and it's believed that KJ Lacy is kind of the guy. He's the leader in the clubhouse in terms of who this coaching staff is going after. What are your thoughts about these three targets, and how do you feel about who Auburn can possibly land? Because I'm a little nervous at this point, Dylan. So I want you to talk me off the ledge for a bit.
Well, I think it's a little too early to be on the edge, because I think Auburn's fairly confident in their guy that they're going to get, especially because you didn't want to spend the money on a transfer portal quarterback. I think Hugh Freeze's
Yeah,
been very vocal about not wanting to
sure.
spend money on a quarterback right now because he can spend money on quarterbacks in the future. But looking at these guys, KJ Lacey's kind of been the favorite that I think a lot of fans can agree with, especially because if you like to stalk likes on posts or whatever, KJ Lacey and his mom have also been liking Auburn posts. I believe Barry Thompson's TikTok was liked by KJ Lacey's mom. So I think there's just big time players want to play with other big time players, and that's what you
Sure.
kind of get with KJ Lacey. I mean, quarterback of Maryland, of course, everyone knows Ryan Williams from last year. Another could be an Auburn target this year, but since has like changed his year and he's now a freshman at Alabama. But looking at his size, kind of fits the mold of an RPO system. He's going to be your dual threat guy. Deuce Knight also would fit a nice little mold as well. The Notre Dame commit. Again, I think Deuce Knight. I think we heard a lot more of him last year, and when this
Mhm.
recruiting class was just starting to kind of get picked up a little bit. I know it was like Deuce Knight was up there. I remember George McIntyre kind of being in the fold a little bit, but I know he has like since closed off his recruiting strictly to Tennessee legacy as he is over there. But kind of just going into KJ Lacey, I think he just has put on some weight. I think he's 170 pounds.
Yeah.
That's kind of a little scary. It's like on a spectrum that's like far too light as opposed to like the 340-pound lineman being far too heavy. Kind of just need to build some muscle, and I think KJ Lacy could turn into a very solid quarterback and
Right.
develop well. Because are we still on the this is Walker White's team going into 2025?
Well, I think Julian Lewis's recruitment was interesting on a lot of levels, Dylan, because
Hmm.
the idea would be that Julian would actually play a factor because of his skill set.
Hmm.
He would play a factor in the QB race in 2025. I don't know if you can say the same thing about KJ Lacy going into 2025. So I think it could potentially it makes things less interesting in my from my perspective, right? I think
Yeah.
Julian was perceived to actually be a real threat. Um, so yeah, I think all things being equal, if Juju was willing to flip to Auburn, I think that would have made things really interesting going into 2025, right? I don't know if that's the case with KJ Lacy, and I'd be curious to see what the coaching staff how they handle next year with the guys, or even this upcoming season with guys, the backup QBs getting reps going into 2025 offseason and spring ball. How they handle that? Do they go after a portal QB or what? I don't know, but
Which I mean,
that make that's I don't know if KJ factors as much as Juju would have.
outside of the only real quarterback in this class that I've been kind of keep my eye on as a generational level quarterback is Bryce Underwood. He's really the only one I've looked at. And like this guy could start right away and be a
Right,
X factor quarterback, but he's strictly LSU. I don't think Auburn really
right,
has a chance of flipping him. I don't think anybody has a chance of flipping him. He will be probably the next great LSU quarterback. But the rest of the class, I think they're just more developmental, which as a 4 or 5 star is kind of something you need to kind of lay back on because not every freshman is going to come out of the gun just letting it fly and being at the top of the sport.
mm,
And that's kind of what I saw. A lot of people kind of agree with that with JuJul Lewis as well, because I think a lot of hype was put around his skill set and just what he is as a player and being hyped up. USC is a quarterback factory. Lincoln Riley is a quarterback developer in every sense of
sure,
the word. But kind of just going into, I think that the quarterback that you get this year would be a quarterback that you're looking forward to in 26 and 27.
right,
Kind of developing into that. I don't think a quarterback in this recruiting class would be ready to start at a SEC program right away. And of course, with like going into like the Walker White conversation, he'll have a year and a half really to kind of get into that mold. And the coaching staff has already been very impressed with Walker White's done as a freshman. Of course, at times he looked like a freshman in A Day, but I don't think that's going to be an insult to anybody if you look like a freshman at
right,
A Day.
right.
But Juju's, I'm not going to be butthurt if he either stayed with USC or went to Indiana, which Indiana being in the mix was not on my 2024 bingo board whatsoever. But with the other two, I think Deuce Knight and KJ Lacy would probably be the two best options for Auburn to go for, especially with the fact that you're getting guys who are, I don't know, I was about to say right across state line, but Carrollton's right over the road as well. But just kind of getting a guy who you can look forward to, because I think the key factor to every great recruiting staff is
Mm-hmm.
getting a quarterback every year. I think
Absolutely.
that's what you see from every 5 star quarterback commits to Bama. There's one a year. You had Bryce Young, you had Ty Simpson, uh, who was the guy? You had Julian Sayin this past year, but he has since transferred to Ohio State. But to really prove that you can recruit year in and year out, you have to bring in big time quarterbacks who can be patient enough to be developed. And of course, you're not going to keep everybody, but that's just
Sure.
something you got to live with.
Sure. Sure. I agree. And then that's what a lot of the programs, and again, if you're having success at the QB spot, those guys are going to be more willing to wait their turn, right? Obviously, you will lose some guys. Again, transfer portal. The name of the game is difficult to stockpile guys at that position. But again, if you're bringing in a QB year after year after year, you have enough people in the room, even with attrition, to be able to have a very competitive room, and those guys can push one another as well. Um, it'll be interesting to see because the reason why I'm concerned, Dylan, is just that when I look at a KJ Lacy, I'm looking at someone who has been committed to Texas for quite some time. And Sark is no slouch when it comes to being a play caller and having success with QBs as well. So again, it'll be one thing if this kid was committed to a school where the head coach was a defensive minded guy, right? Sark has done works and wonders with QBs as well, and so getting him to listen. I mean, obviously Auburn has been in communications with him even while they had they and let's talk about this. One of the things that does give me some hope, Dylan, in terms of being able to flip a QB at this point, because obviously the timetable has been moved up with these guys. Some of these guys are looking to shut down their recruitment before the season starts, and it's tough to get them to really consider another school at this stage of the game. But what I'm impressed with this coaching staff is, unlike prior coaching staffs, I don't think this coaching staff, they have their priorities, but they don't put all their eggs in one basket, right? They're
Yeah.
in constant communication with all of these targets. So it's easy for this coaching staff to pivot off of a JuJul to one of these other guys. Again, they still have their work cut out for them in the regard that they still got to flip this guy. But I like the fact that it's not like how it was with Gus, where if we missed on a target, we're going from a potential 5-star to some 3-star that we didn't even know about, right? You maybe just like we really have to shift the board.
I
I
mean,
don't think that's
there
the
was
case.
there was a 3-star that a lot of Auburn fans probably would have loved to have gotten in Lamar Jackson.
Goodness gracious, yeah, yeah,
But I think looking at the three quarterbacks, I mean, it's an easy sell because I think playing time can play a factor better for Auburn because of the
right.
fact. I mean, if you look at Deuce Knight, he's committed to Notre Dame. Notre Dame's quarterback, Duke's quarterback last year. I can't remember his name top of my head, but I believe he's a junior. So it's like you're only going to
Mm-hmm.
be back there for a year. If you look at JuJul South and SoCal, Miller Moss, I don't know how long he's going to be the starter there, but I think he is the projected starter right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you bring in another talented quarterback like that, there you go. There's your starting quarterback right there in JuJul Lewis. If you look at KJ Lacy and the guy who's in front of him, I mean, Quinn Ewers has another year of eligibility after this year, but
But you got
he's
Manning.
league bound. Then you have Arch Manning, who
Yeah.
per EA College Football 2025, he's an 87 overall quarterback as a backup. Words on that. But yeah, you have more time to sit the bench at Texas than you would at Auburn. Of course, if you go into Auburn after this year, you're going right in the midst of a quarterback battle, meaning you better get your butt in school and graduate early so you can go ahead and enroll early and get the spring to compete with Walker White. I believe Holden Gardner might still be a foot out the door. So really just Walker White, KJ Lacy, and potentially a transfer portal quarterback just to fill out a hole in the quarterback room. And of course, Hank Brown as well, also in that mix. So as opposed to, already put in place starters, you have a chance to get into the Auburn mix right away and start right away.
Yeah.
Because these other guys have already been sold on. You're our guy. After, like, even with JuJul in Colorado, I think a lot of people believe that Shador is going to the draft after this season. And I mean, right there, if JuJul flips to Colorado, Deion's got his next quarterback right there, ready to go as soon as his son goes to the draft.
Right.
But with KJ Lacy and Auburn, you got a chance. Your freshman year.
Yeah. Yeah. Who does Dylan like of the three? I think each of these QBs have their pros and cons, right? And so
Hmm.
I don't want to make it sound like I'm just sour on JuJul because Auburn pivoted from him. He's a good QB. He has his pros. The con I would be nervous about, Dylan, is that JuJul he's mobile, but he's not. I don't think he's an RPO quarterback. And that gives me pause for concern because, and again, I'm not saying these QBs are the same. I'm not making the comparison. But I look at the learning curve that it took for Holden Gardner, right? Learning a new system and how that hindered his ability to compete for the job. right?
Mm-hmm.
With Juju coming in, learning the speed of the game while learning to be an RPO QB, or unless Hugh Freeze and company tailor the offense to fit Juju's strengths, that could happen as well. I don't know, but that would give me cause for concern. KJ Lacy to me is a really good fit for your RPO system, but he's undersized right now, right? Like there's pros
Yep.
and cons with each of these guys. Who are you more excited about? Who would
Mm.
you be more excited about if Auburn lands this guy?
So again, like you said, I think a lot of pros and cons go into this factor. KJ is, I think, going to be my favorite outside of his main con being his size. But
Mhm.
RPO is what he ran in high school, and he can push the tempo probably better than the three guys we're talking about.
Mm.
Deuce Knight, I mean, his biggest pro is his size. You cannot ever be mad about a 6'5" quarterback, no matter no matter what. And my issue with Deuce Knight isn't the fact. I write left-handed. I do a lot of things left-handed, but when I throw a football, I throw right-handed because it's easier to throw. It's easier to teach right-handed quarterbacks.
So
I
you are a
always
left. Are you a lefty? Are you a true lefty?
I'm academically left-handed. I'm athletically right-handed. That's how I look at it. But the athleticism that you get from Deuce Knight is another huge factor. I think if I had to rank him in terms of who I'd be most excited for to least excited for,
Yeah.
it would probably have to be KJ Lacy, Deuce Knight, and Juju, because I think that you go from most ready for the system to least ready for the system. And you got, when you get that kind of athleticism in the first two, I mean, you can't go wrong with that. RPO is built for those athletically gifted quarterbacks. The best of the best of the best RPO quarterbacks are always the ones you're like, oh, he's an athletic freak.
Yeah.
And I think the best person to look at for that is probably Nick Marshall, one of them, who ran the
Sure.
RPO very well at Auburn.
For sure. Yeah.
And then if you, I would never see Hugh Freeze kind of go for a pure passer at a quarterback, which I think is where you kind of get with JuJul Lewis. He's closer to the
Yeah.
pure passer, and the can extend plays. Kind of, I don't want to compare him to Patrick Mahomes, but Patrick Mahomes is the best magician in football at doing that. But he kind of would play action, breaks down. He won't run forward. He'll run out looking for the pass down the field,
Sure.
which you can't go wrong with that.
Sure.
But that's kind of why Holden Gerner probably is one foot out the door, because I don't think he was ever going to work out with a Hugh Freeze system because of the fact that he isn't
Mm.
mobile. I mean, Peyton Thorne works because Peyton Thorne can run. We've seen Peyton Thorne run all over the field before,
Sure. Sure. And he's
but
willing to run.
willing to run too. I mean, he had
Right.
what,
Right.
300, 400 yards last year,
Yeah.
second on the team in rushing touchdowns, third on the team, I think, right behind Robbie
Third.
Ashford.
Yeah. Third.
But yeah, I see it that way. I'd like, you want to find the athletically gifted quarterbacks, almost the tight ends, quarterbacks who you can develop into the P part of the RPO. It's like, at first we want you to run first, but then now you start getting the ball down the field. The intermediate passing game gets started right there. The deep ball gets developed right there, because that's kind of the quarterbacks that you expect from Hugh Freeze. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, KJ Lacy, I mean, he puts on 20 pounds. I mean, we've seen Cam Coleman. He did that in an off season. He
Yeah.
put on like 20 pounds of muscle, and he was ready to go. Because that was like the huge, big thing that people were worried about was, if he gets hit, is he going to be able to get back up?
Sure.
You're going to get that with KJ Lacy. He's going to have another year at Saraland, which is one of the top end high schools in Alabama. He's going to be there in the postseason with them, and he's going to get hit all over Decatur and back. So KJ Lacy is probably going to be top of my board.
He's the top of your board. Okay.
Yep.
Obviously that's who this coaching staff is leaning in on at this point. How good do you feel? Like, obviously we're not recruiting experts. We don't talk to these kids, so we're not making a prediction, but how are you feeling about where all this coaching staff is as it pertains to KJ Lacy?
I think that they're confident, because I think that, I mean, we're not recruiting experts, but we understand the fact that wide receivers want to know who's going to be throwing them the ball. So
Mm.
I think that a lot of wide receivers are waiting on who Auburn will pick up. I mean, I don't know how close KJ Lacy was to some of the Texas commits, but you can probably assume that he probably talks to them every day. I think that you're looking at confidence in if you get KJ Lacy, you start getting wide receivers. But honestly, if you get any of these guys, I think you start getting wide receivers. I think it was like the same thing with Walker White. I think as soon as Walker White committed to Auburn, that's when we were like, oh, well, here come the wide receivers. And like I think that's when Malcolm Simmons and Bryce Kane and everybody started filing in. Actually, I think Malcolm Simmons and Bryce Kane were already committed, and then it came in Perry Thompson and Cam Coleman. I mean, correct myself.
Malcolm committed. He committed Big Cat Weekend too. He actually committed. It may have been right after Perry Thompson committed. Actually, Bryce Kane might have already been committed.
I think Bryce Kane was committed, and then Perry Thompson
Kane was already committed.
Yeah. So Walker White committed before both of those kids did, and then there you go with those two coming in. But with KJ Lacy, I think you're very confident in flipping him because of the fact that you got Arch Manning right in front of you, and I don't think that a soul in the Texas coaching staff wants to feel the wrath of the Texas fan base if Arch Manning does not take that first snap in 2026 or 2025, because at that point he'll be a sophomore going to that year. Or I don't know if he redshirted this year or not.
Let me ask you this. Is that a similar thing that what could happen at Auburn if Walker White takes the job and actually is the guy? Can a similar thing happen there as well?
I think so. Because of the fact that if you commit to Auburn, you're immediately in contact with Perry Thompson and Cam Coleman and the rest of the Freeze Four, who again have all they just did a TikTok with Walker White yesterday. I think as soon as the wins start piling in, if Auburn goes right now, I have them at 8-4. Auburn goes 8-4. You've probably seen a little bit of Walker White in those games, and you've seen a lot of the wide receivers. Going to get Cam Coleman most likely will lead Auburn in some kind of statistical category receiving wise. Once you kind of see the idea of Hugh Freeze offense at Auburn kind of picking up a lot of pace, a lot of steam in the right direction. And you get your quarterback during Big Cat. Say KJ Lacy commits, then you kind of see where the offense looks like, and you kind of see where KJ Lacy looks like at Saraland. Then you kind of see the mold kind of fitting in, and then you see what Walker White did when he was in high school. You start to catch on to, oh well, maybe this isn't the Auburn that I'm used to seeing from 2 years ago. And that's kind of where the confidence is going to start to come in. And again, as soon as Auburn gets a quarterback in this class, wide receivers will pile in no matter what. And not if it's Deuce Knight, if it's JuJul, if it's just random quarterbacks, number 5, just go instantly 14 on them. They'll file in, and that's kind of the kicker is you have to win. The biggest NIL is one huge part of recruiting, but as is winning. And I think once KJ Lacy commits, I don't want to say it like that. If KJ Lacy commits and flips, you'll get the wide receivers, and then you'll get to keep the wide receivers if Auburn goes into this season ready to win.
And I'm curious because, again, you had receivers who were on the board who've recently come off. Guys like Caleb Cunningham, guys like Derek Smith, who was down the street at Selma. Do you think Auburn is back in it for some of these guys, or what new receivers comes with KJ that you can think of? Like, how does that? Obviously, yes, you got a QB on board. Wide receiver recruiting looks more promising, but who's left out there?
Well, I don't think you can ever take anybody's name off the list when it comes to Hugh Freeze. I mean, we all assumed Cam Coleman was going to A&M fully. DeMarcus Riddick, linebacker, we thought he was going to Alabama or Georgia. Just a lot of these names, I don't think you can really kick anybody off. I can't think of any names top of my head that's not already committed somewhere that I'm expecting Auburn to pick up anytime. But you can't go wrong with thinking that maybe a couple of these guys are going to be flipped from whatever SEC team it may be back to Auburn or to Auburn. But there's a lot of big time players in this recruiting class that I'm still very excited to see. When we mentioned Blake Woodby and Quan Fegan, so I almost got confused with his brother. And of course, like running backs like Usman Chroma as well. You expect a lot of those names coming in and a lot of confidence building from both the coaching staff and the players being recruited. Alvin Henderson has already said that he thinks Auburn's going to be a top 5 in recruiting this year.
We will definitely see. And I think as it pertains to, I agree with you. I think KJ, I like Deuce Knight as well, but I agree with you that those two quarterbacks I think are a overall better fit for the offense that Hugh Freeze wants to run. Not the Hugh Freeze that Hugh Freeze, not the offense that Hugh Freeze has to put together to get through a season, but the offense he wants to run. I'm holding out on my thoughts in terms of whether or not this coaching staff can get a KJ Lacy. What I'm looking forward to is when Big Cat Weekend comes and goes, will KJ Lacy have visited? Is he firmly in Auburn Big Cat Weekend? How well does that go? That will let me know that this is probably going to be a recruitment that goes down to the wire. Hopefully, Auburn doesn't drive up the price for this QB because I mean it's Texas. They're willing to compete and hang on to this recruit because they've had him in the fold for a long time. But Big Cat Weekend is going to tell me, okay, I think KJ may be the guy, and I think we're in a dogfight. And I think Hugh Freeze is used to dogfights. He's not afraid of him. He's I think we're fine there. But I think that's going to tell me a lot about whether or not this coaching staff really has a strong chance to flip this kid. We will see in a few weeks. I definitely want to take time to shout out a show sponsor, a relatively new show sponsor that we have, known as Joy Mode. Let's call out the obvious. Everyone wants to head into the bedroom with confidence, feeling like the best version of themselves. But the problem is sometimes our thoughts get in the way of our performance, or maybe we feel like we're just not reaching our full potential. That's where the guys at Joy Mode comes in. No longer have to pick up sketchy gas station pills or prescribed drugs with a long list of side effects. Joy Mode Sexual Performance Booster is an all natural and science backed solution to increase blood flow, firmness, stamina, and performance. Also helps you with your cardiovascular as well. Good product, good folks. Go to usejoymode.com. I'll list that here. Go to usejoymode.com and use code rapport to get 20% off at your checkout. Special shouts out to them for also being a sponsor of the War Rapport.
For full episodes, make sure you head over to the War Report's YouTube channel and check out the Weekend Tailgate. Every Sunday, we're going live. Join us on the live stream at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Until the next time, War Eagle.